This is what you think a nuclear disaster looks like. But there's another kind of nuclear disaster happening right now in the United States.
The US desperately needs more power. For decades, US electricity demand barely grew. Utilities actually planned around relatively flat consumption. Then, suddenly, everything changed at once. And projections have that demand soaring. Semiconductor factories, battery plants, and industrial facilities are sprouting up across the US. Demand for electric vehicles and air conditioning is growing. And you probably heard about this.
Data centers.
Data centers.
Data centers.
A normal hyperscale AI data center already uses as much electricity as 100,000 homes. Meta's new Hyperion AI campus in Louisiana is expected to require at least 5 gigawatts of power. That's roughly the electricity demand of New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport combined. And this will affect your wallet. Residential electricity prices jumped 7.1% nationwide in 2025 and over 20% in some states. But wait, don't we already have the kind of energy source this moment demands?
It is by far the lowest cost of electricity once it is up and running.
Nuclear. The problem is we're barely using it. And it's not for the reasons you think. Yes, nuclear accidents like 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima terrified the public. Radioactive waste raised real long-term concerns. And on top of that, reactors became painfully slow and incredibly expensive to build in the United States. This plant behind me is decommissioned, but we'll get to that later. The real bottleneck is actually this. This is uranium, and it's not quite how it looks in the movies. The US has about 1 billion pounds of the stuff in the ground right now, enough to power the entire country for centuries and fill up Yankee Stadium. Red Sox fans can thank me later. But right now, we have no real way of using it. Instead, the uranium we use to power our nuclear plants comes from Canada, Kazakhstan, and Russia? Yep. The US gets this essential fuel source from the same country it and the entire Western world has sanctioned since 2022. So why is Russia, America's most powerful global adversary, one of its largest suppliers of enriched uranium and therefore electricity? And more importantly, how did the US lose the ability to refine the stuff itself? To find out, I did what we always do on Business Explains the World. I dug into the history.
That is wild.
I talked to experts.
The uranium supply chain is the single worst supply chain in all of energy.
And I uncovered a complicated and uncomfortable dynamic that might determine the future of energy in America. New York City used to get 25% of its power from nuclear, but in the past 7 years, that capacity has been almost entirely replaced by natural gas plants like this one in Queens. What makes this beyond frustrating is that the US invented nuclear power, and we used to be the largest supplier of enriched uranium. To explain how we get out of this mess, I first need to show you what makes uranium and nuclear so difficult to build. And to do that, I need to show you how we got in this situation in the first place. Let's take a journey.
I need to head about an hour and a half upstate to a place I think might help tell this story.
I think you know where this started. In the 1940s, when the US detonated the first atomic bombs over Japan, they demonstrated the immense power of uranium to the entire world. And immediately, everyone wanted a piece of it. Well, mostly America and the USSR. Russia detonated their first atomic weapon in 1949, leading both countries to scramble for as much uranium as they could get. The US bought its way to uranium supremacy. The government started advertising that it would buy any uranium anyone could find in the desert, including a $10,000 bonus. And the radiation rush was on. Stores and catalogs started selling uranium kits and Geiger counters that would go if you got near enough to uranium. The wealth of homegrown uranium was enriched in brand new plants in Tennessee and Kentucky. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, got their uranium by force, taking over existing mines in Eastern Europe and forcing prisoners to work in brutal conditions. They built entire secret cities dedicated to uranium enrichment, closed off from the outside world in remote locations. But it worked. Nuclear power plants started springing up all over the world, generating more and more power and more demand for uranium. Slowly, it became clear that there was a lot more uranium in the ground than initially thought, and America was the biggest player in the enrichment game.
Coming out of the Manhattan Project, we had a program that had developed an enrichment technology called gaseous diffusion. Simplest way to think about it is it's desalinization for uranium. And the way of separating the isotopes, while it worked great, it was very energy intense.
That's Lee Robinson, COO of General Matter, a company trying to bring uranium enrichment back to the United States. But we'll get to how they're planning on doing that later. The US dominated uranium enrichment for a time, but by the 1970s, German scientists and the USSR had figured out a better way to enrich uranium using what's called a zippy-type centrifuge.
So we now had a leap-ahead technology that had leapt in front of the US. So while we had the lead in overall capacity, we were the high-cost provider.
In fact, outside of a laboratory environment, no US company ever built a centrifuge-style enrichment plant. I think we're here. And then the accidents started to happen. A partial meltdown at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania and a deadly disaster at Chernobyl. Public opinion of nuclear power plummeted in the US, and mines and enrichment facilities started to close. The government introduced new restrictions and regulations on building nuclear reactors, and then changed them, and then changed them again. Constant regulation shifts made new reactors catastrophically expensive to build. The first reactor in the power plant behind me cost about $160 million to build in 1970. By 1990, the cost of a reactor had shot up to $1.4 billion. The additional two on this plant cost $2.45 billion in 2007. But that's not actually what killed America's nuclear momentum.
By the grace of God, America won the Cold War.
In the early 90s, the US had won the Cold War, but now they faced a new threat. There were tens of thousands of nuclear weapons and warehouses of uranium just sitting there in a fractured country. Everyone feared that Russia would sell its uranium to the highest bidder, and so the US made a bold move. It stepped in to be the highest bidder. Under a program called Megatons to Megawatts, uranium from dismantled Soviet weapons was shipped to the United States to fuel nuclear power plants. It was an incredible trade deal, at least for the future of humanity. It converted the equivalent of 20,000 nuclear warheads into peaceful electricity for over 20 years. But it was also the death knell for the American uranium industry. Uranium was suddenly cheap, abundant. US companies couldn't compete with the low cost of Russian leftovers, and across the US, more mines and enrichment facilities closed, and the industry shrank even further. Even after we'd exhausted the uranium supply from Russian missiles, the US continued to buy enriched uranium from Russia. They'd kept their uranium pipeline fully operational even as America's scaled down. And then, other countries like Canada and Kazakhstan started building out their own enrichment facilities. The US had an ongoing, inexpensive supply of enriched uranium. There was no need for much domestic production.
In their heyday, there were over 700 active uranium mines in the United States. Today, there are about 7.
And there's just one large-scale enrichment plant left. On top of that, natural gas started to get very cheap, and nuclear plants started to close. About 15 of them between 1990 and 2020. This plant, Indian Point, used to provide 25% of New York City's power. It shut down in 2019. In 2020, the American uranium supply looked like this. And generally, it was fine. Importing cheap nuclear fuel meant lower electricity prices and left other countries to deal with any environmental effects. And that might have been the end of the story for US uranium. Except this guy couldn't leave well enough alone.
Did you know that less than 1% of the world knows how to code? That's too bad because some of the world's biggest problems can be solved by coding. Let me tell you a story about a man named Alan Giroge living in Tacoma. He saw a staffing problem at hospitals that could be fixed with software, but he didn't know how to code. So he used Lovable to build a tool that could match healthcare professionals with open shifts. 5 months after launch, his company had 5,000 users and $1 million in annualized revenue. That's real change in the world, and he's just one of 8 million people building on Lovable. Here are a few more staggering numbers. Every day, builders are creating 200,000 projects. In the first year, people created 25 million projects. Lovable was the fastest growing SaaS platform in history. Within 8 months, they hit 100 million in annualized revenue. And today, they've surpassed 400 million in ARR. On this show, we like to show you how business explains the world. And Lovable's remarkable rise shows you how we have entered the age of the builder. Because now, the other 99% of the population actually has the tools to bring their ideas to life. If you want to start building the future, use our link to get 20% off of your first month of Lovable Pro. Thank you, Lovable, for making this episode possible. Now, let's get back to the show.
In 2022, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, and all of a sudden, relying on discount uranium from a warmongering authoritarian leader seemed like not the best idea. To be clear, the US still does get about 20% of its enriched uranium from Russia. We are nowhere near off Russian uranium. At the same time, a new AI boom has led to a massive expansion in data centers and a huge demand for new electricity. Even 3 Mile Island, once the symbol of nuclear fear, is getting ready to come back online, this time in a deal with Microsoft to provide electricity for its AI processing. Indian Point behind me was bought by Holtec International, a company that builds small modular reactors. There's nothing confirmed, but there is some speculation that Holtec might use this location for a new SMR plant someday. The US is gonna need a lot more uranium. But okay, why not just buy it from somewhere else? Well, we do, but the US allies' enrichment capacity is maxed out.
There hasn't been a new plant built in 15 years.
And that's not a problem that can be solved overnight. Uranium enrichment is an exclusive club, and its members don't really want anyone else to join. The US invasion of Iran was in part to prevent them from making weapons-grade uranium. There are only 37 enrichment plants in the entire world, and about half of that capacity is in Russia. And that's where the real global uranium bottleneck is. See, the reason uranium can be incredibly abundant but also so rare and dangerous is that you have to do a lot of work to this before it can do this. Let's go to the lab real quick. Take that public service I performed in Yankee Stadium. All of that radioactive rock is what you might pull out of the ground. But only about 1% of uranium-laced rock is usable uranium. So this needs to be processed down to this. Most of that happens near the mining sites, primarily in Kazakhstan, Canada, Australia, and Namibia. It's called yellow cake uranium, and this is the material that gets bought and sold around the world. But it's still not pure enough for nuclear power. To understand that and why the Russians dominate it right now, we have to do a little bit of science. In this glowing cube, there are actually two variants or isotopes of uranium. Uranium-238 with 146 neutrons makes up 99% of the mass, and uranium-235 with 143 neutrons makes up less than 1%. The 235 version is the one that scientists need to do this.
And then it's goodbye Yankee Stadium and the entire New York City metropolitan area.
So this has to be whittled down to this. To do that, the slightly heavier uranium-238 needs to be separated from the 235. And this is incredibly difficult because the two uranium isotopes are almost identical in mass, with just the difference of a few neutrons between them. To separate them takes incredibly precise gas centrifuges, the ones that the US never built at scale. And each time it goes through this process, the centrifuges only remove a fraction of a percent of the uranium-238. So they have to do it over and over and over again, hundreds, even thousands of times before getting a usable amount of fissile uranium. The more times it goes through the process, the more refined it becomes, until eventually you get this. Except not this, because this is what the Simpsons uranium looks like, and real uranium is just a rock. It's a fun glow, though. To run a power plant, the mix needs to be anywhere from 3% to 20% uranium-235. To create nuclear weapons, it has to be closer to 90%. Those centrifuge facilities are huge and expensive and very hard to build. And the US only has one of those facilities.
There's one plant that's owned by a Western European operator down in Eunice, New Mexico. From what I understand, a very excellently run plant. But that's it. And they're covering maybe 20 to 25% of overall US demand. So we're talking 75% of all US demand is directly imported.
That facility is Urenco USA, the only large-scale commercial uranium enrichment facility in North America.
It's not even owned by an American company. The decision to chase lower costs over energy independence has come around to bite America in the proverbial. And if there's anything the pandemic or the war in Iran has taught us, it's the importance of a reliable domestic energy supply. But unfortunately, at the moment, we're kind of up creek without a Eugene Levy. The US has been slowly weaning off of Russian uranium. Congress passed a bill banning new imports after 2028. But about 20% of enriched uranium in the US came from Russia last year. Another 30% came from Kazakhstan, which has deep ties to China, another country with some adversarial tendencies toward America. We've been buying uranium from France and Germany, but it's much more expensive, and they're at capacity for what they can send us.
And to top it off, in 2026, with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices skyrocketed, and therefore the cost of energy.
But all might not be lost. The uranium supply chain might be tenuous for now, but companies are looking to change that. There's a huge opportunity here, and they'll do it by addressing those areas where the American supply chain is faltering.
The uranium refinement industry really has 5 nodes to it, and it looks actually just like the oil and gas industry, except at much, much smaller scale. The first node is pulling it out of the ground. It's mining and milling. It looks like actually a very clean version of fracking. It's called in situ recovery. The U.S. industry has mines that are active right now. Up in Wyoming, there's some mines that are coming online in Texas. There's very good geology in Canada, but I'd say North America can be uranium secure in the near term. Then it goes into refinement. The next 4 nodes, you've got to take yellowcake and turn it into a gas.
So conversion, the last step before enrichment, becomes a choke point on the process.
Then it's got to go to enrichment, and you have to separate isotopes. You want a little bit more of U-235 and a little bit less of U-238 so that it can become productive inside of a nuclear reactor. We do not have a single plant that is US owned in America right now producing any scalable quantities of enrichment. And then that deconverter sends it to fuel fabrication to press into a pellet so that it can then go into a reactor. On the deconversion and fuel fabrication step, we have capacity in the United States.
Those middle steps are what General Matter are trying to do. Through a combination of private investors, debt financing, and government assistance, they're currently building out a new $1.5 billion enrichment plant in Paducah, Kentucky. Ironically, the home of the former largest uranium enrichment facility in the US.
We've been working with the DOE on building a facility that will cover roughly 20 to 25% of all US needs, opening the doors by the end of this decade and getting to full capacity shortly thereafter. The focus needs to be on how do we build on time and on budget? And then how do we bring that total cost of the standing up of the power plants, the cost of standing up the infrastructure, to as low as possible? That's when we start to really erode the overall cost of electricity for everybody.
There is no guarantee that General Matter achieves its lofty goals. There's a storied history of American infrastructure projects being delayed and going massively over budget, especially nuclear. The Vogtle plant in Georgia, America's newest nuclear power plant, came in 7 years behind schedule and $20 billion over budget. And it's not even finished yet. If they can manage it, though, the new General Matter enrichment plant in Kentucky could just be the first step in revitalizing the American nuclear industry, provide energy independence, completely carbon-free, and potentially even lower electric bills nationwide. We're going to need a lot of energy in the next few years. America now finds itself at a crossroads. They need more energy, and they can either get it by digging deeper into fossil fuels, importing ever more expensive uranium, or they can do the forward-looking thing and secure a domestic uranium supply. Maybe not all at once, but starting at once. Chasing cheap uranium imports got us into this situation and gutted our domestic nuclear industry. And now, we're in a race against the timeline of our own sanctions and the rapidly rising cost of energy to build it back. But only time will tell if we can make it happen before the clock on uranium imports runs out.